Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so excited to dive into this one with you. Today, we're going to break down the history of 10 massive corporate empires that totally vanished from the face of the earth. But what's truly fascinating here is that they didn't collapse because of unavoidable natural disasters or just sheer bad luck. No, they failed because of specific, identifiable, fatal flaws.
It's a question that literally keeps executives up at night, right? How do seemingly invincible businesses, companies that define entire eras, just disappear almost overnight? Well, when you look closely at the data, the answer usually points back to a single, glaring blind spot in leadership. Because it's rarely the competition that strikes the fatal blow. It's almost always an internal failure to adapt, to listen, or to respect the reality of the market.
So, to wrap our heads around these failures, we are going to organize our 10 case studies into 5 specific leadership blunders: ignoring the inevitable future, destroying the user experience, completely misreading the market, the hubris of endless expansion, and finally, building on pure illusion. All right, let's jump right into number 1, ignoring the inevitable future. Let's start with companies that looked directly at where the world was heading and stubbornly refused to see it. Picture this. It's January 2007, and Steve Jobs has just unveiled the iPhone. At that exact moment, BlackBerry CEO Mike Lazaridis looked at the device and completely dismissed it. His mindset? He firmly believed a phone with no keyboard would never work for serious users. So, while Apple and Android pushed aggressively into touchscreens, cameras, and app stores, BlackBerry just pushed harder into physical buttons. They treated apps like mere side features and delayed touchscreens because they simply refused to believe fingers could replace keys. And the cost of that hubris? Absolutely staggering. Back in 2009, BlackBerry was a titan worth $83 billion. But because younger buyers stopped asking for their phones and users grew tired of slow web browsing and clumsy apps, their market share plummeted to below 1% by 2013, a completely self-inflicted fall. We see exactly the same pattern with Radio Shack. For decades, it was the go-to place for wires and batteries. But by the early 2000s, electronics got cheaper, devices became sealed, and online shopping absolutely exploded. Instead of adapting, Radio Shack's leadership, including CEO Julian Day, stubbornly clung to their outdated model. They kept their tiny store locations and confusing shelves. Instead of genuinely helping customers, salespeople were forced to push warranties. And when things got tough, leadership tried rolling out new logos and slogans instead of, actually offering new ideas. Meanwhile, Amazon made cables cheaper, and Best Buy made electronics clearer. Radio Shack offered neither, which led directly to $1 billion in debt and bankruptcy in 2014. The world changed, and they simply refused to change with it. Moving on to our second fatal flaw, destroying the user experience. So what happens when a company actually captures the market but actively ruins the very thing that brought users there in the first place? Let's look at early social media. Back in 2003, founder Jonathan Abrams built Friendster into a massive social hub. It felt like the internet finally had a social life. But there was one massive problem. The site barely worked. Engineers kept warning that the servers couldn't handle the traffic, and fixing it would be expensive. But because leadership ignored these severe performance issues, pages took forever to load, profiles froze, and messages vanished. At busy hours, the whole thing just crashed completely. The second faster loading sites arrived, the users simply fled. By 2005, the platform that taught people how to socialize online was effectively a ghost town. MySpace suffered a remarkably similar but honestly way more frustrating fate. In 2005, this site was literally bigger than Google. It sold to News Corp for $580 million. But then, CEO Chris DeWolf and News Corp boss Rupert Murdoch made a fatal decision. They prioritized fast profits over usability. They buried the site in banner ads, pop-ups, auto-playing videos, and blaring music. The pursuit of ad revenue literally broke user profiles and froze screens. Users complained constantly, but nothing changed, because fixing speed didn't make money, ads did. And so, millions of frustrated users were driven right into the welcoming arms of a clean, lightning-fast alternative called Facebook. By 2011, just 6 short years after buying it for $580 million, News Corp was forced to sell MySpace for a mere $35 million. MySpace wasn't killed by the competition. It was buried under its own ads. It was sacrificed by leaders who forgot that without a usable product, you don't actually have a business. Okay, number 3, completely misreading the market. Our third fatal flaw involves fundamentally misunderstanding what consumers actually want, or worse, handing the market directly to a rival out of sheer ignorance. Back in the year 2000, Toys R Us was the undisputed king of toys. But CEO Michael Goldstein knew they had no idea how to sell toys online. So he made a fateful deal. Toys R Us actually paid Amazon about $50 million to run their entire online store. Toys R Us got to focus on their physical stores while Amazon handled payments and shipping. Sounds okay, right? But look at what Amazon really got. Customer data. Amazon spent years learning exactly which toys sold fastest, gaining incredible behavioral insights into how shipping speeds changed parent behavior. By 2004, Amazon used that exact knowledge to start selling toys themselves. Toys R Us literally paid their greatest rival to learn how to destroy them, eventually collapsing under $5 billion of debt by 2017. Now, if Toys R Us was a slow misread, Quibi was a spectacularly fast one. Led by former Disney boss Jeffrey Katzenberg, Quibi launched in April 2020 with $1.75 billion in funding. The premise? High-quality, 10-minute shows made only for phones. They spent up to $100,000 a minute on content. Yet, in a stroke of sheer genius, you couldn't watch it on a TV, you couldn't take screenshots, and you couldn't share clips. While YouTube, TikTok, and Netflix were absolutely thriving, Quibi blamed marketing and the pandemic. A mere 6 months later, in October 2020, they shut down completely. They built something incredibly expensive that absolutely nobody wanted. Let's look at blunder number 4, the hubris of endless expansion. This happens when leaders start believing their empires can expand endlessly into any territory without facing any financial gravity whatsoever. Take Pan American World Airways. In the 1960s, Pan Am CEO Juan Trippe was obsessed with making the airline look futuristic, global, and unbeatable. He ordered the supersonic Concorde and swapped over $525 million on 25 massive Boeing 747s. He bet that bigger planes meant bigger dominance. But these planes were incredibly expensive to run and really hard to fill. While competitors focused on efficiency and domestic routes, Pan Am flew half empty across the globe. When the 1973 oil crisis hit and fuel prices exploded, these massive planes became fatal liabilities. Pan Am canceled the Concorde order, but the bills stayed, bleeding the company for decades until they finally shut down in 1991. The prestigious image outlived the actual business. General Electric followed a remarkably similar, though honestly much broader, path of hubris. Under CEO Jack Welch in the 90s, the strategy was simple. Own everything, and be number 1 or 2 in every single business. Under Welch and later Jeff Immelt, GE became this chaotic monster. They made jet engines, power plants, medical scanners, and even TV shows. But most dangerously, they quietly ran a massive bank called GE Capital to keep easy money flowing. They genuinely thought they could master every industry simultaneously. And here is the cost of that endless expansion. When the 2008 financial crisis arrived, GE's finance arm cracked, shaking the entire conglomerate. Because they were intertwined in everything, they broke everywhere, all at once. To put that into perspective, the company required a staggering $139 billion in government support just to stay alive. By 2018, the once invincible GE was kicked out of the Dow Jones entirely. Which brings us to our 5th and final flaw, building on pure illusion. This is what happens when entire businesses are constructed not on solid foundations, but on complex financial smoke and mirrors that simply cannot survive contact with reality. Let's talk about WeWork. CEO Adam Neumann didn't just sell desk rentals. He sold investors a grand vision of elevating the world's consciousness. And investors, primarily SoftBank, bought it, pouring over $10 billion into the company. But underneath the cool decor, the couches, and the craft beer taps, the actual business model was incredibly risky. It was just real estate arbitrage. They were legally promising landlords rent for the next decade, while merely hoping that strangers would show up month to month to cover that cost. When those strangers didn't show up, the long-term bills still remained. This illusion bled money, losing nearly $1.9 billion in 2018 alone. Well, reality finally caught up in 2019. When WeWork filed to go public, the required paperwork exposed the terrifying depth of their losses to the world. Investors completely backed away, the massive $47 billion valuation instantly evaporated, and the IPO collapsed in September 2019. Ironically, while the company burned, Neumann simply walked away, forced out with a payout near $1 billion, a massive fortune built on a business that fundamentally didn't work. But the ultimate illusion in modern corporate history? That belongs to Lehman Brothers. Under CEO Dick Fuld, Lehman felt totally untouchable, having survived a century on Wall Street. Fuld believed that bigger bets meant bigger wins. They filled their balance sheet with mortgage bonds backed by extremely shaky home loans. To buy them, they borrowed unprecedented amounts of money, betting that home prices would always go up. By 2007, Lehman's leverage was utterly toxic. They owed more than $30 for every single dollar they actually owned. When housing prices finally fell, nobody wanted those shaky bonds. Lehman couldn't sell them, but they still had to pay their immense debts. The illusion shattered. On September 15, 2008, all confidence vanished and Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. They held $613 billion in assets on paper, but carried over $600 billion in hard, undeniable liabilities. It remains the largest corporate failure in United States history, literally bringing the global financial system to its knees. Looking back at all these wild cases, from BlackBerry ignoring touchscreens, to MySpace chasing ad revenue over user experience, to Lehman Brothers gambling with 30-to-1 debt, it leaves us with one undeniably powerful thought to consider. When building or analyzing any empire, we really have to ask ourselves, what is the true greatest threat to a business? Is it the competition innovating in a garage somewhere? Or is it the unchecked ego and blind spots of its own leadership? Take that question with you today. Thank you so much for exploring these fascinating stories with me, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.